Good evening. Tonight, we continue a conversation we started here at Virginia Union University about 5 years ago, initially called Real Talk Men of Color in STEM. Over the years, it has emerged to Black men in STEM. We felt it appropriate to be a little bit more specific about whom we're talking, considering the HBCU setting and considering the culmination of events over the last few years affecting Black America in particular. Big shout out to Ms. Tom Walker and Ms. Alexandra Merritt, who served as STEM coaches in our STEM Career Center at the time for their vision in putting this together, and to Dr. Ruffin, who was here with us today, who has been part since day one. This conversation started out as an outlet to discuss the challenges and opportunities Black men face in the STEM profession. Tonight, we specifically focus on the criticality of Black male mentorship in STEM. I have a dynamic panel of Black men here that not only talk the talk, but walk the walk regarding mentoring the next generation of STEM professionals and leaders across all disciplines. My name is Carl Jackson. I'm an associate professor of chemistry, currently serving as chair of the Department of Natural Sciences here at Virginia Union University, and I'll be your moderator for tonight's lively discussion. The stars of the show this evening will all be brothers I've known for some time now, of whom I'm very proud to share the stage with and excited to present to you at this time. Our first panelist is Dr. Hal Arbery. Dr. Arbery is a research methodologist and a statistician whose primary interests are the application of intermediate and advanced statistical methods in the design of experimental and non-experimental research studies and education, public health, social and behavioral sciences, as well as a plethora of other endeavors. Dr. Arbery earned degrees at Texas Southern University, the University of District Columbia, the Morgan State University. He's completed his postdoctoral research at the Institute of Urban Research at Morgan State University. And over the last 30 years, he served as either consultant, co-author, or author of over 100 research papers, evaluation, and planning reports. As a higher education administrator, he has served as department chair all the way up to acting provost and chief academic officer. He has served on committees of over 20 doctoral students and as a research methodology and advanced statistics consultant for over 100 doctoral dissertations. Dr. Arbery served as a senior fellow at the National Center for Health Behavioral Change. In addition, he served as a non-resident fellow at Tuskegee University's National Center for Bioethics and Research and Healthcare. Although he is semi-retired, in his words, he's still conducting research, publishing, and mentoring new groups of young scientists. I count myself as one of those who has been helped by him. I met Dr. Arbery several years ago on this big NSF grant we were working on, and I was just in awe of like his wealth of knowledge in the field and of HBCU history. And so I just take a point of privilege to just give my personal perspective of Dr. Arbery. And after that, he always told me, call me anytime, anything you need, offer his advice as assistant free of charge. And so, and of course, anytime I'm called, of course, he's always come through. So, he has helped me. He was helped by someone along his journey. And all he asks is that I remember to do the same as I look back and try to help those who come after me. And so we welcome my brother, one of my mentors, Dr. Hal Arbery.
Thank you. Thank you for the gracious introduction. I have to start with my journey.
Let me, Dr. Arbery, I definitely want you to do that.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. Right. And I'm going to introduce each
right.
panelist, and I definitely want you to pick up right there.
All right.
I appreciate you, sir. The next panelist we have is Dr. Mark James. Dr. Mark James received undergraduate degree from the Virginia Union University, his master's degree in educational leadership from University of Phoenix, and a doctorate in higher education and higher education administration from Delaware State University. Dr. James is a dedicated leadership professional with over 20 years of experience working with students toward academic development and success in the classroom and extracurricular activity. He's highly experienced in establishing, mobilizing student-centric learning environments while partnering with internal and external stakeholders to achieve university objectives. Has a proven ability to designing and fundraising programs that has yielded thousands of dollars over the years. He has experience in a wide range of areas, including urban school teaching, CEO of a large nonprofit, college football coach, educational sustainability, motivational trainer and speaker, and of course, much more. He is the CEO of the Urban Trauma Healing Institute, which concentrates on addressing the critical needs and education by exposing the pain caused by systemic thinking. They believe that in order to create a position of healing, one must speak truth to power. Since he's been back at Virginia Union, he's been one I can also call on anytime I needed something in his area, and he knows that he can call on me anytime he needs something in my area. We welcome this evening Dr. Mark James. Welcome, brother. The next panelist is Dr. Gerard McShepard. Dr. McShepard earned his PhD in biology with the cognitive neuroscience from Tennessee State University. He also holds a master's degree and a master's of science in molecular biology from Tennessee State University. And he received his bachelor's of science in biology from Fisk University. Before arriving here at Virginia Union, Dr. McShepard taught at Fisk for a number of years, as well as Columbia State College and Murray State College. Dr. McShepard has served in a number of administrative roles throughout his career, including Associate Director of the Fisk University Pre-College Summer Enrichment, Director of the STEM Enrichment Summer Institute here at Virginia Union, Chair of the Department of Natural Science, Interim Dean of Arts and Science. I can go on and on, but I especially want to highlight his new position as Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences for Edward Waters University. His interests have been on the molecular mechanics that regulate sodium-dependent high-affinity choline transport for specific functions in plasma membrane. And I won't go into those specific functions because I just won't. I'll let him go if he feels the need. So he has published, books. He has published his invertebrate zoology book through McGraw-Hill and plans on publishing another book very soon on African Americans in science, technology, engineering, and math. Dr. McShepard has also served in a number of leadership positions in different societies, social organizations, and honor societies. Welcome, Dr. McShepard.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Dr. Vernon Ruffin. Dr. Vernon Ruffin received his undergraduate degree in biology from none other than the Virginia Union University, and his graduate degree in neurophysiology from Howard University School of Medicine. He's also trained at the Albert Einstein School of Medicine and University of California, San Diego, under by Gabriel Haddad. Dr. Ruffin has completed his postdoctoral research in both Yale School of Medicine as well as Case Western Reserve School of Medicine. He's an advocate for mental health and has proved again and again how our brain can redefine our perception of life completely. His research focuses on the regulation of pH. His current research focus, the regulation of pH in the mammalian brain. Dr. Ruffin is an experienced speaker on neuroscience and offers many different insights on these topics. He is a self-educated neuroscientist, but that hasn't stopped him from reaching the top. By understanding the brain and the mind, we open up the most complex questions about mental health, physiology, cognition, so much more. And of course, in the business context, neuroscience is important as it allows us to understand human behavior and of course actions behind colleagues, employees, clients, competitors. Dr. Ruffin is available for multiple different keynote topics. If you want to call on him to speak as a motivational speaker, from being Black in STEM to neuroscience, Dr. Ruffin is an excellent choice to speak to students and faculty alike, or in any organization. So, Dr. Ruffin, we welcome you this evening. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you, and I just want to personally say thank you for accepting this invitation to have this conversation. Again, this is Real Talk Black Men in STEM, but the theme of tonight's event is the criticality of STEM mentorship, talking specifically from the Black male perspective. Before I jump into my prepared questions, I want to give each of you a chance to say anything that I may have left out from the introduction, or just say some words of welcome. I'll start with you, Dr. Arbor.
No, no, you cover the waterfront pretty well, and I'm just happy to be able to share my incredible uh, journey that unfortunately not too many folk looking like us are able to benefit from.
It's very true. It's very true. Dr. I'll jump to Dr. McShepard.
Yes, sir. Just looking forward to the conversation. Before I became department chair, I served in the Office of Institutional Research for 2 years and currently working on my master's in public health at Virginia Union University.
Amen.
Amen.
Uh, Dr. Dr. Ruffin. Oh, Doc, you muted.
I'm just happy to be here. It sounds like this is going to be a great discussion, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Yes, absolutely. I believe it will be. And these guys, I've called on them for specific reasons. You know, Dr. Ruffin has been doing an excellent job since he's been here as a mentor, not just a research mentor, but a mentor to the students. Dr. McShepard, when I came here, he was one of my mentors. Again, I already mentioned Dr. Aubrey was a mentor working with him as he came in as a consultant with a grant. And then, of course, Dr. James, since he's been here, we've worked on a couple of things. If he reaches out, he needs something in the sciences, I'm there. I need something on the mentoring side, he's there. And so we have worked on a number of collaborations. So I'm definitely looking forward to this conversation. So this what I'll do. I'll go ahead and jump right into the questions. And as I ask you these questions, I do want to address certain individuals. And so, and then of course, we'll open it to floor. But I'll start off with the first question. And I'll address this to you, Dr. Aubrey. And it's to tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are today, particularly how you've been helped through mentorship, whether Black or white or female, male or female. So not necessarily Black male mentors. And then I'd ask you after that to elaborate on how you see the importance of Black male mentors in particular for other Black males.
Well, first of all, I would start by simply saying, and I'll take a excerpt from something I said at a speech that I gave in 1995 in my home community, which is Palestine, Texas. I said Palestine, not Palestine. Okay, that's a little farm type community in East Texas where I was born and grew up at. It was my mother's hometown. I was invited back to give a keynote speech for the Negro Business Professional Women's Club in 1995 when I was on my maiden journey in higher administration at Norfolk State. Everybody was talking about mentors this and mentors that. I started my speech off by saying that I grew up in a neighborhood. I don't know about a hood. Okay. And I didn't know the word mentor, but I had them. But that was an expectation. It wasn't something that was just talked about. It was just an expectation. And I talked about the plumber on the corner, Mr. Reagan, who was a plumber. My grandfather, who was a pillar in the community, who had a building contracting business, and also had a farm that I grew up learning about, all about farm animals, and I had a pony and all of that stuff. But what my point is that mentor is a term that describes something that Black men always did, and Black females too. And as I said, I am what I am because of them. My grandfather started teaching me numbers when I was 4 years old. By the time I was 5, I knew how to count I knew my timetable was 12 times 12, any number you call it. He had a 6th grade education. He started talking college with me when I was 7. He said, son, you got to go to college. And he told me his story of his family and how he was growing up on a sharecropping farm and how he became a carpenter, all that. I grew up learning everything he did, and also he loved numbers. He loved math. Well, you know, carpentry is nothing but math. And I learned the concepts that I later employed becoming a statistician way back then. He used to play, we didn't call it a game, something he did. The way he taught me how to add and subtract, we would go to the grocery store or go shopping. My grandfather he was the man in that day. My grandmother made a list of what she wanted, and I went with him. And he first told me he showed me a price on an item. He said, put that figure in your head. Okay, then he said, when I get to the counter, if you have a better figure than me, I'll give you a prize. Now that was the foundation of estimation, which is the fundamentals of statistics. Now that was 4 and 5 years old. Now I never had a better estimate than my grandfather until I became 21 years old in college, and he died the next year.
Wow.
Because I played that game with him every time I went back home. I always hung out with my grandfather, as I always did. In fact, the older people in the community used to say they remembered how I'd be riding his truck. I put his hat on my head, and I was so little they could only see the hat, but they couldn't see the person under the hat.
Absolutely.
Dr. So that's where I really got started. But I had mentors all along the way. On the neighborhood, on to college. I mean, I still have a few mentors still living.
Yeah. And now, those are the types of situations, though, that we think about way back. You know, I didn't call them a mentor, right? But they were mentoring, though.
They were mentoring.
But I want to, and I know you probably got some more, but I want to give everybody a chance to get in their perspectives. Dr. James, I'll repeat the question, and it is to tell us about your journey to where you are today, particularly on how you've been helped through mentorship, whether it be whether it's from Black, white, male, or female, and to elaborate on how you see the importance of Black male mentorship for other Black males. So your journey and how you see the importance for Black male mentorship, Dr. James.
Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening, gentlemen. That question is quite an essential one when it comes to me and my life and the challenges of life at an early age. For me, actually, in the 4th grade, there was a white Polish teacher that realized that I could not read and helped me. He asked me, what did I like? I said, I liked wrestling. He used wrestling. He would buy wrestling magazines every week and bring them to the school. And he would stay after school with me and, or come before school early, and he would help me out. Secondary was a man by the name of Vernon Doolin. And I was young, just like many people, and not really thinking of choices that I was making. And Vernon Doolin, I remember, took me to the Sistrunk. He said, do you trust me? I said, no, not really. But he took me to the Sistrunk Library, walked with me in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And he showed me an old film of African warriors up on the hill. And he said, that's you. You just don't know it yet. And then the final part of that would be my godfather, when I was at home, kicked out of my first college and just working 2-3 jobs, just trying to raise my son myself. He said, you need to go back to school. And henceforth, I went back to school at Virginia. I went to school at Virginia Union University, and the rest is history. So mentorship is essential. It is the essential key. After the 70s and 80s, many forms of the way that the Black family mentored each other dissipated.
Yep.
And it became more so that mentorship came from the available people around you. And many times the available people around you might not be the right people. So those are my 3 points of mentorship that changed my life.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for that story. And some of these things I would have never known, because you've been so successful to this point. But like you said, it was because of those people who pushed you, because of those mentors. Dr. McShepherd, I pose to you the same question. How were you helped, and how you see the importance of Black male mentorship?
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. And I'll say it also started for me at an early age. My father taught in the public school system for a number of years, about 30 years. And he would always do experiments at the kitchen countertop in order to make sure that the experiments work right for his students. And so my brother and I, my sister, we sat there and indulged him as he did these little experiments in order to make sure that the experiments worked right with his students, either that next day or that next week. And so that sparked my interest in science. And every summer on my grandmother's 90-acre farm in DeKalb, Mississippi, I would grow up there. And of course, you know, I did that until age 20. So that was quite some time to be on the farm and just basically look at all the animals and work with the animals, and then just, you know, ask all those different questions that you ask, and, you know, with the little baby chickens. And my grandmother would show me how to care for those little baby chickens as well as the other animals, and just learning all those different questions that as a young inquisitive kid would ask, and that honed in on those self-esteem items in order to spark that interest in science. Now, my grandmother, one of my mentors, as well as my parents being my mentors as well, but my grandmother would always joke with me and say, stick with the books, because the manual labor, that was not for Gerard McShepherd. It was not. Going out there and doing all that extra work and stuff and sweating, no, that was not for me. So she told me to stick to the books. In fact, she was one of the people, once we started to attend college, she was one of the first ones to pay for tuition for us. Of course, our parents paid as well, but it's always good to have that support system to pay for college, especially when you have twins in college and you just finished graduating a daughter from college as well, and then you got two twins in college. So that sparked my interest there. When I made it to Fisk University, although my father wanted us to attend Tennessee State University, when I made it to Fisk, there was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Henry Ponder, who I spoke to about a week ago. He just had his birthday. I think he turned 95 years old. And he's still,
Dr. Ponder.
yes, Dr. Henry Ponder, my fraternity brother. And so when it came to the time for me to join a fraternity, of course, Dr. Henry Ponder, who folks thought that my brother and I were his nephews, because we'd always be having breakfast with him and everything. Of course, we would be spending time with his daughters as well there on campus and everything. So he thought that we were his nephews, the campus did. And it was just one of those experiences where you get all that advice from a gentleman who had served at the pinnacle of education and provide all those bits of advice. So I basically stayed in contact with him through all those years with Dr. Henry Ponder. And so taught at Fisk, got my master's degree. Of course, most people don't know this, but I was a night librarian for about good 2 years while I was working on my master's degree. The quickest master's degree I ever got, because I had all the resources that I needed in the library. So I stayed there late at night doing all types of research and getting the information that I needed. And so my professors even asked, how did you get that article? How did you get that article? So I work in the library. So it was great for graduate school as well. And then just moving up to my doctorate and still staying in contact with Dr. Ponder and having my parents serve as my mentors, my support system. And then Dr. Robert Newkirk, my mentor, served as the advisor for my master's degree as well as my PhD. And then Dr. James Townsell at Meharry. So I was one of those unique students in the graduate program where not only did I do research at Tennessee State University, the other, not Texas Southern, Tennessee State University. Yeah. So I get that all the time. TSU, so is that no? Tennessee
the other
State.
TSU.
The other TSU, Tennessee State. And I also got the chance to do research with Dr. James Townsell at Meharry. And so he was a well-known neuroscientist. He just passed away about a year maybe 2 years ago. And so he Dr. Newkirk and Dr. Townsend were the gentlemen who toughened me up, so to speak. So we definitely made sure that we learned a lot of things with Dr. James Townsend and Dr. Newkirk.
Absolutely,
Yes,
absolutely.
sir.
And I know you probably have mentors, because even as we go up into the career, we still gain mentors. And so as I mentioned before, want to get everybody in, and I do want to have some time for us to, finish any thoughts that we wanted to come back to. But I'll let Dr. Ruffin attack this question. How were you helped? Who were your mentors? How did they help you? And then also, if you have time, to give us some insight on the importance of Black male mentorship.
All right. Thank you very much for the question. And I had a chance to actually think about this question as you guys given your answers. And I had to start thinking back. Well, my first mentors, I was lucky enough to come from a home where both my parents were together, and they were actually educators. I actually come from a line of educators. Grandparents were also educators. And my brother, I'm younger of two, he was an example. He went to medical school. So I had kind of like a template for me. But if we're going to talk about within the school system, people that were designed to be placed there to help me get closer to my career. When I think back, my first introduction to a Black teacher in junior high school, with two of them actually. There was one that was a math professor, and there was one that was a vice president. And the math professor, I guess so it's important to be relatable, which is I think where this conversation is going to go. These represent what they can be. But there's a two-sidedness of that, because now you're familiar. And so I think back, we used to make fun of the math teacher because it reminded us of somebody on a cartoon. And then I bring up the other person because it's important to be relatable. It's important to be reachable, but it's a crazy world. And so the other person that was relatable, he was actually taking advantage of the fact that he had access to students. And it was later on found later that he got charged for his behavior. So as students trying to identify with somebody that is a Black male, you look to what you know. Either the parent, maybe depending on their mood, they may be angry father because of the situation that they have to do work, or it's just you have to figure out what type of students that you are actually interacting with. And the students, they need to identify somebody that they can see themselves in. So that really started my next interaction with males was at Virginia Union. And this is where I saw at HBCU, it's not just one stereotypical type of male. There are a broad range of people that you can look to for resources, and not just males, females. So I think that's a great thing about Virginia Union. And so I just want to make mention of my undergraduate advisor, Dr. Archer, who passed away, and is from Virginia Union. You may know the history of him. And at Howard University, Dr. Ovid Trost, somebody that was well known in the respiratory physiology department areas. And so he was very influential for me to get to the other side, which is now I'm at CWI's, predominantly white institutions, and access to those resources. So Gabriel Haddad was a very influential mentor, and also Walter Brown, who I'm currently still working with. That was my postdoc advisor. So it's important to have mentors. It's important to be relatable. I think that's where we as Black males in this field really have to manage those opportunities.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And as you mentioned, Dr. Archer, he's also one of the ones that brought me on as well. So definitely gone but not forgotten. Thank you for your insight there. Before I move, all right, so I'll move on to the next question. And I'll start with you again, Dr. Ruffin. And the next question says, what do you see as the biggest hurdle to the plight of the Black community today? We're talking about mentoring. There's a reason why mentoring is so needed. We're tired of hearing the daunting statistics. We know about these negative statistics, but they're very real and they're a very real part of the conversation. So what do you see as a priority as we look to tackle some of these deeply systemic issues?
I think one of the major things that we need to do as people in general, recognize our worth, recognize the value that we have. Can't do that, then it's difficult to recognize the value that other people have. And if you are trying to learn from somebody, then there's walls that need to first come down. You're dealing with pride, you're dealing with a whole bunch of other things. And being that we're in the age of technology, they have options. And so maybe what you're talking about worked 5 years ago,
Right.
but it doesn't work anymore. And students have now the option of just saying, you know what, I don't want to do this. And they're okay with whatever comes next. And so, we just need to be um, able to move them forward without feeling ourselves falling behind. So it's important to stay current. I think one of the issues that we have, or major hurdles, is mentors need to stay current. They need to be able to service the population that they're designed to help. But technology makes it difficult. So,
You can't stay stagnant when the next generation is constantly changing. You can't be stuck in that one position. Um, and and anybody, the next, anybody can jump in, but I'll throw that question to you, Dr. McShepherd, as well. We know the daunting statistics. We know the hurdles that as the Black community has to run into. What do you see as a priority as we look to tackle some of those deeply systemic issues?
Thank you, Dr. Ruffin. So, I said it before, I'll say it again, that we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I say there's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone, right? So we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable by making sure that we form these pipelines and also build the self-esteem of these young African-American men who, for some strange reason or another, during their path in life, they have encountered some type of barrier or roadblock to prevent them from moving to their complete potential in their life. And so it's extremely important that we do that. And, oftentimes we talk about programs, but we need to continuously have programs to build the confidence of young African-American men. And those young men also mentor other younger men in order to complete the generation to generation of mentors that we need so much in the African-American community. And I'll allow some additional time for some others to speak, but
that's excellent. Get comfortable being uncomfortable.
That's right.
Training these young brothers to be mentors to even the younger brothers. I'm gonna call you in, Dr. James. You have a perspective on that. What do you see as the priorities of getting over some of these institutional barriers? You got you muted, Doc.
I like to say, this is what I do every day, grassroots level. So I was at a school today with a young man that is continually in problems, young Black brother that's continually in problems. And the magic 3 words that he says is, I don't care. So you've got to go deeper in research on why do they not care? So, for me, the way that I view this, I've never had a regular job in corporate America. I've always worked with young people. And that's the magical question. What is the magical answer, right? Here's the thing. The system of racism, the system of capitalism, they're systems. You can't change anything until you create a new system. You got to create systematic thinking. When I look at, we could just take a historical perspective. We were talking about wars earlier, right? So when you look at the tradition of war, after every war, there's a civil war. Well, after America gained independence, there was a civil war, but there was a continual war waged on people that wear the weight of our skin. So when you think about that, the only war that we've waged was the civil rights movement, which is not a war. It was a civil negotiation, not necessarily a war. And in that civil negotiation, one of the things that we did is integration changed a lot of the strong tenets and mores that we had in our communities. And Malcolm used to say, the chicken coming home to roost. What we're seeing right now is that our generations have lost the value of being of African descent in this country. So when you ask about mentorship, you've got people that don't understand that because generation to generation, they've been taught not to be able to think of that as something important. I'll say this last thing and then I'll yield. In the Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Pablo Freire, he speaks about this. And I think this is the story of our lives, right? We're in this circle of oppression. And in that circle of oppression, when that person gets free, he's got to make a decision. He or she's got to make a decision. Once they get free, do they question the oppressor, or do they turn around and oppress the very person that was oppressed with them? And we have to be realistic. We have to take ownership that we have helped to oppress ourselves. You know, and that's what I'm seeing when I see with these young people in post-COVID and trying to give mentorship, whether you're talking about elementary, middle school, high school, or college. I call them students without a face because they live behind a veil. So mentorship is more important now than ever. We can't take things for granted thinking that, oh, these kids will be fine. They're just going through a fad. No. Through COVID, we were jacked up before COVID, but listen, we are in a state right now of emergency. Our young people are in a state of emergency. So I'll close with that and I yield to somebody else, but we are in a state of emergency. And that's what really interested me in coming on this call because, we are in a state of emergency. And the young people, the way they think today, Dr. Ruffin said it, the way they think today is not the way that we thought.
No.
So, I'll yield my time.
Man, yeah, and I know you, and I know this is your life's work, and I know this your passion, and the same with all the panelists, man. But you're telling the truth. You're telling the truth, and I'll offer this same question to you, Dr. Aubrey. What are some of the major priorities you see as we battle these systemic barriers that particularly affect Black males?
Well, first of all, there are many I can point to, but I'm gonna try to sum up and say it this way. One, developing an identity and purpose for life through education. That's number one. Then second, economics. Okay. Now, I'm gonna give a little point back to the era we talked about Black males. A number of people probably don't know, maybe they do, but many I talked to I've been talking to over the years, last few years, they don't know how this whole genesis got started. One of my mentors, Dr. Spencer Holland. Dr. Spencer Holland was the forefront of this whole movement to study Black males, period, back in the 80s with his Project 2000 in Baltimore. I was his first doctoral research assistant. We had this large center from a ABLE Foundation grant, which I'm writing about that now. And he went all across the country, encouraging communities to set up programs to mentor African American males. He had 3 schools in Baltimore public school system: the Robert Coleman School in West Baltimore, the Cold Springs Elementary School in South Baltimore, and Southside down in far South Baltimore. And they I designed instruments. We measured the gains of these students, these young Black males who put in all male classes from first grade, who were already programmed for special education. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Holland had this theory that he could turn it around, which he did. By the way, Dr. Holland was a developmental psychologist, and his specialty was brain research and neuropsychology. He's still around. I haven't talked to him in a few years, but he was a very, looking back, he did a number of things back then that have become the groundwork of what we're doing now. The work he did in Baltimore and pressing for all male classes, things like that, the private education changed the rules and allowed for single gender schools to start back in. Dr. Howard was on newscast at that time, 2020 Newsweek, preaching not preaching, but articulating what the plight of black males. And see, that was the, like I said, if you look back in the history, that was the first time it ever became an issue. Okay. And
it was ever brought to light, you mean, like on a national scale?
No, I'm talking about research.
Okay.
Where black males was a subject with any kind of research. It started with Project 2000. And the name Project 2000 he coined because she started in 1988 to track these African American males from Baltimore, those three schools, that would have been, if they successfully got through 12 years of school, they would have been graduating in the year 2000 from high school. And my postdoctoral work was working on keeping that, tracking them over those years from those elementary schools. Okay. But
how did that work out? I mean, just I know it probably all sorts of results, but just in general, was it pretty successful?
It was very successful.
Yeah.
Because, as I say, I'll tell you how successful it was. The famous case, United States of America versus Virginia Military Institute, worked from my research as a doctoral student. Dr. Howard was entered into that case. On the side of maintaining a single gender school. And that was it like I said, Dr. Howard was speaking from coast to coast.
Yeah.
He was on every major news program that era, and he was what work he published and dissertations was done on the work. I developed the first instruments where we measured the success of these black males from first grade. A lot of you start with just say a little bit about that. Most of those African American males that started those schools did not even know their full name. And
that seems to be a common theme, though. And I said that seems to be a common theme where we look at underperformers, and when we said, like we said, it's not the failure of the student; it's actually the failure of the system. And you know, and Dr. James, when you gave us a little bit about your background, I would have never guessed that. And now, you know how your interaction with your mentor at fourth grade, I would have never assumed that about you. And so that tells you, like, it's the failure of the system. And I know I know you probably got a lot out of that research study, but I'm just looking at the time. I do have one more major question I wanted to present to you, but before I did that, just give you just a little statistic just to give you an idea about some of the systemic barriers that we face. There's a report on the U.S. News and World Report looking at the way that different school districts are funded, whether it's a black school district or a white school district, high income, low income. And we know that school systems are funded based on the taxpayer. So, for instance, if you have higher property values, those school systems will be more funded. But the study showed that there was a $23 billion difference in educational funding for predominantly white schools versus predominantly black schools. And this is a report by AidBill, which is a nonprofit that focuses on educational funding. And so I think, yeah,
that's historical.
Yeah.
And there's been laws passed on that. And the school finance law, the first major one, was done in Texas.
Yeah.
Over 30, 40 years ago. For that same issue in San Antonio, Edgewood Public School that was predominantly Hispanic.
Right.
And across that whole tax base, they couldn't afford things that San Antonio Independent School District others could afford. And that that was a Supreme Court's decision about that. But of course, it's a reoccurring thing. What my point is, it's a reoccurring thing. And we've had that. That has been forever a situation.
That same study goes further to break down that per student, that's like a $2,200 per student difference as far as a black student versus a white student. But again, that's one of the barriers, and I want to get back to our focus on mentorship and try to stick with the script a little bit. But like you said, man, this is why this thing started 5 years ago. This Real Talk Black Men in STEM, because we would get to things, and it's so much more to unfold. So before we start to elaborate on some of the past questions, I do want to ask a different question. And this, I'll start with you, Dr. Jane. Tell us currently what you're doing in terms of mentoring. And I know your role, but I definitely want to hear your insight. In terms of mentoring, reaching out, maybe you have some of you have businesses. What are you currently doing? Use this time to highlight some of what you're doing to give back to future generations, or even current Black STEM professionals.
Yeah, basically, right now I am the mentoring coordinator here at Virginia Union University, and through the program that we put together, we signed a 20-year contract with RRHA, the City of Richmond, RPS, to be able to mentor the students in. Right now, we're doing Gilpin Court. We have plans within the next 5 to 10 years to be able to increase that to all of the 6 housing units in the city of Richmond. As you know, Richmond has the largest public housing on the East Coast, which is hard to believe, but the little city that we live in, it's for a reason. The opposite part, this is Plantation Row. So you know what the system of slavery did, so this is the result. So besides that, I'm the founder of Urban Trauma Healing Institute, which is a seed program to build a school that is going to be teaching young people, young men specifically, trades, STEM trades, and also STEM careers, STEM opportunities, and giving them exposure to different things that they normally wouldn't get in the public school system. So that's what I do, and that's what I'm currently doing.
And you being modest, because I know we got other panels, but you do so much more, and we appreciate that. I'm gonna kick it to you, Dr. Aubrey. What's some of the things you're currently doing to mentor either a younger generation or either people who are already in professional field? I already gave my story about how you helped me at some points, but
Well, I like to say, with good reason, I became a mentor when I was still being mentored.
right.
And it was I called it by accident. When I finished undergrad, I was encouraged by a mentor, Dr. James Cunningham, one of Virginia State's graduates, encouraged me to go to DC to be a congressional intern with the late Congressman Barbara Jordan. And I did that, and then but I always wanted to teach. So then I got to an opportunity to teach in Ballou High School in Washington, D.C., where I was introduced by a mentor's wife. She introduced me to a young man in her class who said he wanted to be an accountant. And get the name of this class. This class was called Bachelor Survival. They were teaching at Ballou High School to high school students at that time. And the young man's name was Kevin Dorsey. Kevin Dorsey, so I said, I'll tell him what I know. I carried him to the library that day, and then I put up the book about accounting, explaining what best I could do. Then about a week later, he found me in the building. Ballou High School at the time had about almost 4,000 students. He found me in the building, asked me to help him with some homework. I helped him at home with his homework. And then maybe seemed like every other week, he did the same thing. Kevin Dorsey and his brother Victor were from Valley Green, which was ghetto, if you want to put it that way. They were the kind of kids who were bright, were not in getting no trouble, anything like that, but they gave them A's and B's for good behavior, but wasn't teaching them. Okay. And at any rate, I'll say a long story short, I always say he taught me how to be a mentor. Okay. Today, Kevin Dorsey is a member of the Senior Executive Service, U.S. Department of Transportation, Inspector General's office, where he's been over 20-some years, and he's doing exceedingly well. And he's also mentoring too now, as I mentored him. I have many others, students like that, mentors I taught. One other person I point out is Dr. Kirk Henning. Dr. Kirk Henning is a senior epidemiologist, CDC. In fact, he just got promoted a week ago as associate director of the Office of Equity. I met Kirk Henning when I was completing my doctoral work in my last year teaching public schools at in Washington, D.C. There was a young lady named Erica Rollins who I was mentoring, who came through to Jefferson and Teach for America. She had graduated from the University of Virginia. She was from DC as a Spanish major, an English minor, but didn't have a job. So she went to Teach for America. Okay. One day she said to me, Mr. Orford, there's only one black male in this group of Teach for America. He's the only person who don't have a mentor. Would you consider being his mentor? And I said, well, I do the best I can. Here comes Kirk. Kirk Henning came to visit me. And of course, I started walking him through the process of, helping him negotiate the school system. And he told me a story. His parents were immigrants from Jamaica. And he grew up in Silver Spring. And he had finished with Desert Chevy Chase High School, which was, of course, one of the top high schools in the country then and now. And he had no plans to go to college. Because his father was a chauffeur for the Spanish embassy. His mother worked as a domestic. And it was the first black counselor stopped him and said, you haven't come by to help me, help fill out your papers for college. He said, I'm not going to college, my folks don't have no money to see me to college. So she said, you come by my office anyway. There was a black guy, I don't know his name, remember his name, but I heard a lot about him, especially when I went to Norfolk State.
Is this the same guy we talking
No,
about?
no, it's a guy that was at James Madison in the early 90s who was responsible for getting a large number of black students to go to James Madison. He recruited a lot of people, and Kirk was one of those he recruited. But
Gotcha.
Right. But when Kirk finished James Madison, he graduated magna cum laude, double major and all that, but he had no job. Came back home to Silver Springs, he started looking at the paper, and he looked at Teach for America. And then, of course, when I got to talking to him and what have you, he said, I want to go to graduate school, but I don't want to go back to a school like James Madison.
Right.
So then he decided on going to Howard. And he went to Howard, got his master's and his PhD in medical sociology, and with a strong mind in statistics. And he's done, the rest is history.
Absolutely.
You plug his name in, you will see that he's led teams in Liberia when they was fighting Ebola crisis.
We'll look them up just for the sake of time. I'm sure, and I'm sure you'll share with the panelists that information. Just for the sake of time, I want to get some other insights on. Just telling us currently in terms of mentoring. I'm gonna kick it to you, Dr. Ruffin. What are you doing? What are you doing to reach out? Again, I'm looking at your shirt, so I want you to get a chance to shout out what you're doing. And so use this time to highlight that type of stuff.
All right, so I have a minority research training program. That's one of the initiatives that I'm pushing right now. And it really developed from all of the research that I had gathered during my postdoc. And because my research focuses on something so central to cell, and I'm able to kind of give people projects that can help start their careers and expose them to research. So that's what I've been doing most recently at Virginia Union, and the lab is now called the Virginia Union Protein Analysis Lab at Virginia Union. The Rough and Narrow Lab itself has become a virtual platform, and the services not only undergraduate students, but also down to the elementary level and beyond, graduate, undergraduate, and even professionals. And so, really, what we focus on is academic training, research training, professional development, and networking. And there's a platform also for people to play the type of talents and things that they're working towards. And because of the networking, I have the ability to send people towards a career choice of people at other institutions that have resources or appropriate things that can more custom to somebody's path.
So you're not, and you, if you're part of the reference neural lab, you're one of those students participating, benefiting from it. You don't necessarily have to be doing neuroscience. Of course, you guys talk about the different aspects of research, but you don't have to be in neuroscience, particularly the student, to get engaged, to benefit from what you're doing, right?
No. Actually, neuroscience is only one of the arms that I've really mostly been focusing on. And I was most recently told my advisor told me, you just stop focusing on neuro so much. You are a physiologist, so that means I can also talk about cardiology, digestion, and GI. I can talk about respiration. I can talk about a bunch of different things. My research initially focuses on neuro, but
Yeah.
the platform that I'm developing now is open to all of physiology.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was clear because, I know you have some of my chemistry students that's involved. You had students that come through the university that have graduated and that are still involved. And so I know you do a lot with that. And then, of course, you have the protein analysis program here, which is more so the hands-on research that we do through the university. Did I cut you off?
Oh no, that's really what the initiatives are. If you're interested in the projects, are always developing because my collaborator and I are always talking about how we can increase STEM capacity, doors that we can open up. So for any further information, you can just follow us on social media, roughandneurolab.com, or you can actually go to, roughandneurolab.com is the website, but roughandneurolab on any platform where you can find it.
Yeah, you'll be able to find him. He's all over social media, so you'll be able to find him. Dr. Thank you for that, Dr. Gerard McShepherd. I'm gonna kick it to you, sir. Tell us what you're currently doing as far as mentoring, reaching out, anything you might want to promote at this point.
Okay. So I got to give you a context from Fisk also. So I give a shout out to my undergraduate school. But when I was at Fisk, I worked with the pre-college program that helped to mentor students from high school to attend college, so that gave them those life skills they needed. And then when I arrived at VUU, I myself had a lot of mentors, and they told me to mentor others. So Dr. Madu, Dr. Perkins served as mentors to me, and including Dr. Archer as well. And so, and of course, I served as a mentor of Dr. Jackson as well from the faculty side. And so I still like to say I'm still mentoring from afar. I still mentoring from afar. I also served as the director of the STEM enrichment program to get more African Americans in education. As you know, there's a shortage of African American teachers, and I think that that's one of the main things that we need in order to have people that look like us to be able to train and educate the future of America. And so that's extremely important. Also, I've served as mentor to assist students to get into Meharry med school through that summer internship program. Then we also serve as mentors of students who are currently working on their PhDs. I know we had one student, Nat Lee, who completed his PhD, his doctorate, and of course we got Corshay Williams, who is completing her PhD in chemistry at MIT. So that's the VUU perspective there. And then so when I was at VUU, we also did the geological agriculture, where students work with Richard Campbell as well. Currently at Edward Waters, we're working with a group of students with a program called the Innovation Fellows Program, which is housed at Stanford University. We got one of the students who is on this call tonight who is completing his application for that. And so this is a conglomerate that assists universities with leadership development of students as well as faculty. And so those are just a few things that I'm doing currently with mentoring as well. And of course, I got a couple other people who are in various, I guess, levels of achievement on the faculty level that I've stayed in contact with in order to help give them advice on, how to become the next department chair, how to become the next dean as well. And so I've been working with them, mentoring them as well. So.
All right, and I know all of you guys, and the reason why I selected you guys to have this conversation tonight, are doing so much more than you just shared. I'll add that I was reading this a different article, more like a blog post, and it was talking about the criticality of having a mentor in general, not necessarily STEM. And honestly, we're talking about STEM because we're all scientists, right? We're Black men, so we're talking about Black male STEM mentorship. But mentorship, it serves the purpose, regardless of what field you're in. So, but what I'll say is, in this article that I was reading, it kind of separated out the different types of mentors. You have the mentor in the traditional sense, like we've been talking, where you might, long term, you might not talk to every single day, but over the years, they're the ones you go to get advice. And then you have the champion. And the champion is listed as the active supporter in your career. So specifically where you are right now, they may be in a higher position. They've been there, done that. They can give you the insights. They can give you the connections. And so all of us have had mentors, those like long-term mentors. We have all had champions who know exactly what we're doing, have familiarity. Um, and then, of course, then there's the coach. And that coach might be someone who dedicates time and effort towards a specific moment in your life or whatever. And coaches sometimes can be paid. These are, so a coach can be a mentor that's really just doing it out of the kindness of their heart. But coaches can also be people like consultants, not necessarily doing it out of the kindness of their heart. That's what they do. That's what they've studied. And so, as we think about mentorship, um, champions being, supporting your career, and then coaches. Do you guys think, is there anyone that you think may be more important than the other? Is there anyone that might have more of an impact in your life, in terms of mentors, champions, and then that coach? And then this is
Yes.
to anybody.
Dr. Jackson, I would say that every person that's in any career always needs to have a coach, always needs to have a champion. And I'll say this at my new destination spot, Edward Waters, Dr. Oliver and Dr. Scipio have definitely served as champions and coaches in regards to my current career as Dean of Arts and Sciences. They have been very supportive of me and providing just valuable advice about a career and even being supportive in regards to me advancing my career past the point of Dean of Arts and Sciences as well. So I'll definitely say that, and I'll be remiss if I wouldn't say this. Dr. Claude Perkins, who actually took me under his wing. Remember, I mentioned earlier that he's basically put me in institutional research, and and these are his exact words. He said, "We're going to put you in the position that needs to be done because it's extremely important, but most people don't want to do it." mentioned that, and of course, institutional research, that's not really a job that everybody wants to do.
Right,
but,
yeah.
I did
but
it.
but it is the most critical position on any university campus, and
Yes, sir.
those 2 years were extremely valuable for
You
me
learned a lot. Yeah.
because it led me, and Dr. Perkins also said, so we're gonna put you here until something frees up. And so, something did free up, and then I became department chair.
So I'll quote what you said earlier. You had to get comfortable. You had to get out your comfort zone.
That's right.
It's another thing you say.
That's right.
Was it no growth? How's it go?
So
Is it no growth?
I said that there's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. So you got to be uncomfortable, and so that was one of the positions. It allowed me to work with every single department chair and dean on campus, and so we were collecting data, collecting information, in order to make sure that the institution was compliant with SACS. So that was one of the most important positions I ever held. In fact, I still use the knowledge that I learned from institutional research from that position
Yes,
as
sir.
department chair, as interim dean, as assistant dean of graduate programs, and
Yes, sir.
and now at my new institution as dean of arts and sciences. Yeah, so hey, valuable to learn, valuable to learn.
So we're talking about the differences between the champion. You know, so for instance, that person that supports you in your career, somebody significantly higher than, have had higher position than you, senior manager, that person who wants to help promote your interests, who can talk to the higher ups about you, for instance, and the goals that you see to succeed. That's the champion. And then that coach, um, that's that person that can dedicate their time to help you to success. Again, that might be for a short period, for a specific project, but kind of almost more targeted versus just a general mentor. So, and thank you for those insights, Dr. McShepherd. Did anybody else have anything to add in that? And when I'm specifically asking, do you see one more as valuable than the other, or do you see not necessarily more valuable, will have more impact in your life in particular? And then we want to broaden that conversation. So as you're thinking about this question, broaden that conversation to the current state of Black males in America, right? Because we are in a kind of unique circumstance, where you have the systemic issues, and it seems like in the last 5 or so years, things are starting to get brought to light. And honestly, I'm trying not to ramble on about it, but I was looking at the news of the night, and it seems like crime is up. I'm hearing war on the news. I hear moms crying about their children, and I'm like, what are we really doing? Are we really making progress? Right? There's these models out there, and we know mentorship is absolutely needed, but let's get a little bit more granular.
Like
Dr.
this
Ruff.
is my personal opinion, but I think out of all of those people, and we're talking outside of the family unit,
Right,
I
right.
think most impactful for me was coach.
Okay.
And I say that because I wish Dr. Mark James was still with us. I think he does a very important job. And I think kids or students or young professionals, first thing that they learn is how to work with other people.
Right.
They have to learn how to lose. They have to learn how to win. And this is the job that a coach builds early in their career. They learn discipline. They learn how to fight through. They have to run sprints, and they have to practice. They have to do all of these different things that force them to learn how to be individuals and work as a team. And I think those early interactions with students, you're gonna get a student interested in what they're interested in. And we naturally like to go outside and have fun and play and everything like that. So in an organized fashion, then a lot of these life skills can be introduced. So I think being a coach is very instrumental. But coach can only get you a broad sense of how to be characteristics that you need, the 7 pillars that are characteristics. But once you decide what profession that you want, take those life skills and you actually apply it to something, then that's when you find a mentor that actually can help guide or hone that in. And I think those champions are people that saw you in the beginning of your career and are watching you develop, and they're always there because they have gone beyond the textbook, they've gone beyond the research project, and now they see you as a human. You see them as a human. Be able to talk to them and gain information from their experiences, and also give them hope. Because I mean, the worst thing that you can do is help somebody and they don't say thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
Or like, you know, you like did I just spend all of this time helping somebody? They don't recognize that being a mentor takes work.
yeah, yeah,
It's taking away from your family to help
yeah.
somebody else. Them as last part that I wanted to add, but I think it's extremely important.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
Dr. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, yes.
All right, I'd like to chime in on that. First of all, when I think about it, mentor is a nice new term or newer term, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds great, but the thing about a coach is a coach takes somebody somewhere that they can't take themselves. Okay. And a coach is essential. I look at the call, we've got Dr. McShepard here. Something as simple that he does is say scholar in every email, right? Dr. McShepard, you don't even know it. My players when I used to be the coach, they used to come to me and say, he calls us scholar every time we sees us. I said, because he can see something that you haven't developed yet. So we are all coaches, and our training is different, but we are all coaches. I look at Dr. Jackson, Dr. Ruffin. Dr. Ruffin, I follow you on social media because I think that what you're doing is awesome. But you guys are like leading the pack here because number one, because you're closer to the age of the newer generation, right? And they're seeing you guys do these great things. Neuroscience. And Dr. Jackson, I see the programs you're running. So we're all coaches. The problem comes when we don't coach when we're supposed to coach. And I want to say this to you. I'm a straight shooter, so I got to say this. When we got to start asking the question of why we don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? In order to fight the system that's there, if you don't ask the critical questions, you'll never get the critical answers. And the critical answers are always the most simplest, right? All of you guys are researchers, and I know it always comes back down. You say, wow, that was right there in front of me. One of the things that I want to say is in order for all these things to take place, the coaching, the mentoring, the giving back, when we die with all those gifts we give. So if we don't plant the seeds, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Comes down to one simple thing. Do we love each other?
Mm-hmm.
See, a lot of people take that for granted, and a lot of people are like cliche with it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like I could look at Dr. Michelle and say, brother, I love you, man. I watched the way you worked. I watched the things you did. I could look at Dr. Hal and say, brother, I love you. I might not know you personally, but I've known the work that you guys were part of in Baltimore. I could say to Dr. Ruffin, man, that neuro lab, man, listen, man. I showed that to my son who's at West Point now. And I was like, look at this brother right here doing these big things. You know what I'm saying? Look at this, because he's getting ready to go into intelligence, and he wants to also minor, I can't even spell, something analytics, data analytics or whatever like that, right? So I say all that to say this on a serious note. Brothers, it comes down to, do we love each other? And if we do, how do we convince those that look like us, that are younger, that we love them? Because unless we love each other, go ahead, sir.
I'm finished. I have something that just sparked something. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying in closing, unless we really start saying that, we're really, because the only thing that's going to move the system is love.
Yeah.
And the reason why the system is in place is because we oppress each other. Some people might look at Dr. Jackson, Dr. Ruff, and like, man, who they think they are? I love them because I see them as the next generation, and the baton has been passed to them to pass it to somebody else. So I really want to make that an emphasis of my partaking in this conversation, is that we have to say, because Black men don't love each other.
we don't share it. We don't show it, right? We are
Let me
you
be
are you th-
let me be specific.
yeah.
Okay, we have been taught not to love each other.
Mm,
Exactly.
You know, even when I grew up playing athletics, we were taught not to. I mean, everything is about competition, right?
right.
And there's a fine line between competition and not liking somebody, right?
No, no.
So
Mm,
think about the way society is, capitalism is. When black brothers and sisters are successful, guess what? The pendulum is swinging the other way for the other black brothers and sisters that can't get out of Gilpin Court,
mm,
right? So the system of capitalism has been laid specifically and righteously for the people that have put it in place, which the oppressors have done. So unless we address everything that we're talking about with love, that's the seeds that we have to do. You know, and I'm just going to be honest with you, Dr. Jackson. This just came to me over through COVID. And I was like, every year for 28 years, I've been fighting this fight. And it came to me. The reason is that we have to fight it with love.
yeah.
We have to fight it with love. The last thing I'm gonna say is when I heard that young man today at Albert Hill Middle School that said he did not care, who was in the dropout prevention program, who they already he's got special education, he's got the whole 9 yards you want. When I hugged him today, he started to cry.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
started to
yeah,
cry.
yeah. I know you're
Eat
right.
it
I
with
know you're
love.
right.
I yield my time, brother Ruffin.
Yeah, so Dr.
Uh,
James, you made an excellent point, and I just want to follow up real quick on that. It makes me think of the initial thing that I said when we have problems loving others because we have problems loving ourselves. We
Ourselves.
don't recognize the value that we have in ourselves.
Right.
And historically, and you can have a historian come up and correct me, but they have a thing called the dozens where we
Mhm.
intentionally try to devalue each other to bring more value to ourselves.
Right.
And I mean, this is the climate that we're in. You know, I mean, if we just need to exactly move in love and recognize that we have value. And I mean, I think that Dr. James is comfortable saying that he loves all of us because
Right.
he's comfortable with himself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If he feels like he's inadequate or somebody's taking something from him or opportunities or whatever it is, then we become scavengers more so instead of being civilized. That's really what we're talking
I think that furthermore, we're basically talking about the situation that we are in terms of social structure. As we start this program off, Dr. Jackson made mention of things that's happened over time over the last several decades. What he's basically was talking about was the breakdown of social structure in African American communities that had existed forever and a day, and it's like we just are scattered now. And then the younger generations and succeeding ones, they're disconnected. And of course, technology has amplified that disconnectedness. It hasn't really helped. Whenever you find two people in a room, sit down and text each other on the phone rather than speaking to them, you know you got a problem. But that happens more often than not.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
In
But
fact,
let
it's
me say,
almost routine now.
let me tell you, man, Dr. James. It's hard to explain how, in the the short period of time we've been working together, um, we connected. But I think in your passion just now, it spoke for itself. That's why I know with Dr. James, when I call on him, I can rely on him if I'm doing a grant and I need to make sure there's a strong mentorship aspect. And he knows when he call on me. And so, but what I hear what you say, there's love, there's a passion that we have to have. You can't just be doing this for a check. We all happen to be in academia, but this is not about STEM, being a STEM professor. This is about what helps young black men rise up and be able to be in the STEM field. Period,
Purpose.
where we're underrepresented as doctors,
Purpose.
as engineers, as statisticians, as computer information system professionals. And so we're trying to build up these young black men, which I think what you were getting at, Dr. Ruffin, about maybe not seeing themselves as adequate, maybe not having that self-love, maybe not having that mentor early on to tell them that they're actually smart, to tell them that they're worth something. And so that's what we know on this call that we need to do. And another thing I heard Dr. James say, was well allude to, I should say, is why aren't we doing it the right way? And the question I was asking, and I think we should all ask ourselves, is we study this stuff, we pontificate and we talk about it, but when was the last time we walked out and had that conversation with that brother? That's why when you said you hugged that brother, I was not surprised when you said he cried, because he probably hadn't had a hug in a long time, especially not from a male role model. So that's powerful, man, to be able to say, brother, I love you. You know, and I'm just being 100% real with you. It's kind of feel I love all y'all. I know it, no doubt in my mind. But I'm not the type of person to be like, man, I love you, brother. I was laughing because Dr. Ruffin, you'll say, Dr. James was comfortable with that. But anybody who knows Dr. James, he ain't the type of person that you walk up on and test. And so, so he's a big dude. So he's comfortable in what he does. So,
Oh,
but that
nah,
should be
not
for
at
all
all,
of
man.
us.
Not at all. Not at all.
That's why I said earlier
Yes, Lord.
about the idea of purpose, uh, uh, identity, and life's purpose. They're foundational social structures that people without that, they have problems. No matter what they do, they have problems.
So true.
And it has to start with that. You have to first have that sense of identity. Who are you?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what am I? Then it becomes to what am I capable of? And of course, exposure and the guidance of those around you, either directly, or indirect, what have you, helps you develop that identity and determine ultimately a purpose. And when those things are missing in the dynamics of that social space, then you have the chaos you have. And they're often far more missing than anything before.
Yeah.
And of course, with me as being a statistician, but I still get, oh, you're a statistician. Okay. And Dr. McShepherd, institutional research, at least half my career was dealing with institutional research. Directing it, part of it, all of it. That's how I got started. But numbers, we have so many people afraid of numbers, which is amazing.
Yep.
It's still amazing to me, but it's still an issue because folks can't see themselves as that. And in my professional career, I'll tell you honestly, throughout my career and even today, I have seen many people that look like us who ought to know better, but still have issues with black folk deal with numbers. They would take somebody else's numbers over mine. We said the same thing.
Yeah.
I've seen throughout my career.
That sounds that sounds like you're hitting on this another part of that self-efficacy, almost the self-image, almost, and some might say self. I don't know if I go as far as self-hate, but some might even say self-hate,
It
or
is a
almost
part of self-hate.
where you been conditioned to be understood as less than. When you mentioned the fact about how the research had just started a few decades ago on black males in particular, it made me wonder, because I know there's still that espouse the viewpoint that, well, it's nothing to research because they assume that that African Americans are inferior, like as far as intelligence, and so y'all trying to figure out a problem. It just but in reality, we know it's based on this history, this long history. I was going to say 400 years, but you can go before the 400
Before
years.
that,
Yeah,
long
before that. And some of you guys have studied it a little bit more, so you can give. But I'll tell you, like that makes a difference, and it hasn't been long since we've been out of slavery. If you talk about generations, and that makes a difference when you put a certain type of community together, you structure it in a way that it's almost impossible to be successful. And that's what he's talking about, the structural racism, these types of things. It might not be an individual that's racist, that hates you, but it's already set up.
Social structure.
The social structures, yeah. And I think it's a social structure when you can put a black man in that position who's just doing their job, but they're carrying out that structural racism because they're doing their job the way it's supposed to be. That's how you know it's structural. It don't have to be a racial white person in that position that's carrying out that discriminatory practice.
Right.
Dr.
That's
Jackson,
built in.
Dr. Jackson, the greatest thing about racism is that it works without the people, the oppressor, putting their hand on it. So And when you look at the years of oppression that our people have been in this country, in this world, really, one of the things that you have to think about, let's look at South Carolina. The African slaves outnumbered at different parts of time, for every one white person, 20 to 28 black African slaves. Okay? The part that we have to free ourselves from is the mental slavery. Bob Marley said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. It has done far more damage to us than chains. You know what I mean? And
Yes, sir.
that's the point that we have an opportunity now to be able to change. The difference between success and failure is an opportunity. If I was able to take all 4 of you that are on this call right now and be able to bring you in front of middle school young black men that have been taught that I've got 22 of them that they're basically setting them up to be out of the school system.
Right.
If I brought 4 of you in front of them and you guys told them what you did, it would blow their mind. Out of that 22, the opportunity of meeting you guys, there might be 5 to 10 guys out of that group that turn it around because they see the tangible evidence. The
Right.
young man today told me, he was like, Coach, he said, my mom don't care about me. I let that one go, right? Because I had to define what care was. He said, my dad got shot 7 times and is paralyzed. I didn't even cry when I heard he got shot. Again, you know, I remember being a kid and my older cousins punching me and say, you better not cry, you better not cry. We have distorted the view of how black men should be. And that's why black men have oppressed. Okay, let's just be honest. We have not only oppressed ourselves, other black men, but we have seriously oppressed black women. And to the statement that you said, when we get in position, well, when we get in position, we do what the cycle says. We oppress each other.
Yeah.
Because the title becomes more important because we don't have power.
Right.
So when you give me a title, you empower me. But I'm empowered, but I don't have true wealth. So the people that we are really working for control the wealth. So, like I said, you know, I just wanted to add on to what you said. You know, we have to really look at it and we have to ask ourselves a question. And what we do daily, are we oppressing each other? And how we teach them, are we oppressing each other? Those are the things that you have to do to be able to move out of the bucket of self-hate.
Yeah.
In that same vein, I want to share with you something. I'm making sure as I can. I have a
Dr.
I have
Arbit,
a mentor.
before you start, this is what I'll say. I want you to let your get your last thought out, and I want everybody to be able to go. I'm gonna go around and let everybody get their last thought out as we start to wrap it up. And so it's such an engaging conversation, and this is another reason why we have to have this more regularly. So Dr. Arbery, please proceed. Sorry to cut you off.
I have a mentor, a mentee who is a teacher up in Northern Virginia in Fairfax County Public School System. Fairfax County was one of the places I did teach about 8 years before I started gospel work. And he was an all-state football player in Virginia, all-state track and all that. But when it came to finishing high school, he had his academic average so bad because he had done poorly in school that nobody wanted it. So then I contacted my cousin. I had a cousin at the time who was a football coach at Morgan, the late James Phillips. And so we got him in when he graduated. When he graduated from Morgan, I carried him out to a studio so he could take some pictures of his cap and ground. And we was riding back, I was dropping him off. He said, African Americans have never been deprogrammed since slavery. And we've been passing down the trauma from one generation to the next. I pulled over the car and said, will you repeat that once again? I said, that's probably the most profound observation that you ever have made, probably as you walk the planet. But I wanted to share that because, he's Alfie Maurice Parker Of course, he was definitely first generation and all that, but he's done very well over the years. And I also had him to do real estate. He does real estate in North Virginia also, so he's helped a lot of his family. But that was from high school at what's called Justice High School now. At that time, it's called Jeff Stewart over in Falls Church.
Dr. James, any last comments before we wrap it up?
Mentor or die. That's how
Love it.
simple it is. You're either giving back or you're accepting the situation for what it is, and you're just as guilty as the oppressor that created it.
Love it, love it. Dr. McShepard.
I would say continue to mentor, as Dr. James said, mentor or die. I definitely agree with that. You know, we talk about Black men in STEM. We don't want to have a population of people become extinct, right? And so one of the best ways to prevent the ecosystem from getting to the point and stuff where it just disappears is to continue to mentor our young men, Black men in STEM, black women in STEM, and continue to let them know that we care for them, that we love them, and also impart in their minds that not only are they being mentored, but they will have to mentor others in order to continue the generation to generation to generation. Otherwise, we will become extinct and die. You know, I always talk about by way of the dodo bird. Y'all know what happened to the dodo bird, right? Dodo bird just became non-existent and couldn't fly anymore, and then all of a sudden became extinct as a result of becoming complacent. So I'll say it again: there's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. So as we grow and continue to mentor others, we must learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable as we mentor our youth of tomorrow as well as the next generation. And that's the end of my statements.
Man, Dr. Ruffin.
Wonderful session, everybody. Pleasure being here tonight. I think in closing, what I can add is that yes, mentoring is important. Works best. Somebody actually wants to receive the mentoring.
Right.
So if you try to catch them once they have already decided that they don't need, it's going to be wasting time. And it's good to be an example, but to target a group that's actually willing to receive it. So the younger, the better. After they get exposed to other influences that may be more powerful than what you can offer as a mentor, it'll be more difficult to help them. So it's important just to make sure that you have somebody that's also trying. So I've known some students actually that they take pleasure in watching you struggle. So you got to be careful in your energy expenditure. But just remember that everything that you do, there are eyes on you. So even for people that don't consider you or you don't consider them the mentee or you're not their mentor, they're still watching. And that's an example. There's not many of us out there. So we need to walk with integrity and excellence. That's how I'll end it. And I love y'all.
Yeah, we gotta get comfortable saying that. I love you. I love you. Hey, look, man, it was an absolutely engaging conversation. You know, what I got out of it, I heard, you know, structural inequity, structural racism, I heard trauma, but I also heard love. You know, I also heard, you know, getting out of your comfort zone. We talked about mentorship. We talked about self-love versus self-hate. Power. We get into power. Do we really have power, or are we really just contributors to that structural racism? Getting students early, mentors versus champions versus coaches. It was a really engaging conversation. I'm so glad you guys were able to contribute. I so appreciate it. But you already see that it was so much more that we could talk about. So that's why we want to continue this conversation. I want to thank all the participants who were here to join and listen. Appreciate you taking the time. And that's all I'm going to have for tonight. We thank you so much for coming out. Until next time, you guys have a good evening. And we love you.
Take care, brothers. Love you guys.
Take care.
You have a good night.
Take care and have a
Take care.
great night.
Like Ola, because Alexi.